Hello everyone, and welcome back to Snowbound Screams. Tonight, we travel into the forgotten backroads of America, places where light fades, and what remains are stories that refuse to die. Across these hills, rivers, and empty towns are accounts drawn from witness reports, police files, and archived broadcasts, each one verified, recorded, and retold in their own words. Yellowstone National Park transforms in winter. The summer crowds vanish, replaced by an unforgiving landscape where temperatures regularly plunge below zero. In this season of isolation, the park's rangers become the only human presence in a vast wilderness of snow and ice. They are the first responders in a place where help is hours away, and where nature's laws can bend in unexpected ways. The stories we will explore tonight come from ranger reports, search and rescue logs, and witness testimonies spanning 3 decades of Yellowstone's harshest season. These accounts document events that occurred when the mercury dropped below -20 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature where exposed skin freezes within minutes, where metal becomes brittle enough to break, and where the line between reality and nightmare can blur in the whiteness. What follows are 8 cases that defy simple explanation. They represent moments when experienced wilderness professionals encountered something beyond their training, beyond their understanding in the frozen heart of America's first national park. Now, let us begin with our first story. In the unforgiving winter of 1998, Yellowstone National Park became the stage for one of its most enduring mysteries. It was late January, and the landscape was buried under deep snow, with temperatures consistently plummeting below zero. Ranger Mark Jensen, a 42-year-old veteran with 15 winters of experience in the park, set out for a routine 3-day patrol of the eastern boundary. Known for his calm demeanor in extreme conditions, Jensen was well prepared, with a fully fueled snowmobile and emergency supplies for a week. His last communication was a routine radio call at 4:01 p.m. on the first day. He reported seeing bison and setting up camp as planned. That was the last time anyone ever heard from him. When Jensen missed his scheduled check-in the next day, a search was initiated. What rescuers found at his campsite only deepened the puzzle. The tent was standing, his sleeping bag was still in its sack, and his cooking equipment was untouched. A thermos of hot chocolate had frozen solid on his table. Most disturbingly, his emergency beacon, designed to activate automatically, lay unused in its pouch. There were no signs of a struggle, and critically, no tracks leading away from the campsite. The mystery intensified 3 weeks later, when Jensen's snowmobile was discovered 7 miles away, near the edge of Lamar Valley. The vehicle was undamaged, with a full tank of fuel, and its engine was cold. The GPS confirmed it had followed his planned route before stopping abruptly. Yet, there were no tracks leading to or from the snowmobile in the fresh snow. The most perplexing clue was the speedometer. Frozen at 47 miles per hour, a high speed for the terrain, and pointed toward a stand of trees it never reached. The key was left in the on position. The official investigation was inconclusive. Theories ranged from a sudden medical emergency to a wildlife encounter. But none explained the bizarre crime scene-like evidence. The case took another turn when a recreational photographer came forward with a picture taken on the day Jensen vanished. When enhanced, the photo appeared to show a second set of tracks, approaching the snowmobile from the north, before turning back tracks that had been quickly covered by drifting snow. Ranger Mark Jensen was never found. His disappearance remains officially unsolved, a haunting entry in Yellowstone's archives. For those who knew him and worked the search, the unanswered questions linger in the frozen valleys, a chilling reminder that in the vast, isolated wilderness of Yellowstone in winter, some secrets are held forever by the cold and the snow. In the unforgiving winter of 2005, the geothermal wonders of Yellowstone became the backdrop for one of its most perplexing incidents. It was early February, when Dr. Eleanor Reed, a respected geologist from the University of Montana and an experienced veteran of Antarctic and Alaskan expeditions, set out on a solo research mission. Her destination was the Norris Geyser Basin, an area she had special permission to study during its harshest season. With temperatures hovering around -22 degrees and a wind chill nearing -40, the conditions were extreme, even for a seasoned researcher like Reed. Her 5-day expedition proceeded as planned for the first 3 days, with her regular check-ins to park rangers painting a picture of routine scientific discovery. On the 4th day, however, silence. Dr. Reed failed to make her scheduled call when repeated attempts to reach her via satellite phone went unanswered. A search and rescue operation was launched, led by Ranger Daniel Rodriguez. The team's first discovery was Reed's campsite. But what they found there was not the disarray of a struggle or the confusion of someone lost in a storm. Instead, they were met with a scene of deliberate, inexplicable order. Her research notebooks were laid out in a precise semicircle around her collapsed tent, each open to a different page. Her geological samples were meticulously arranged by color and size. The only sign of her departure was a set of tracks leading away from the camp and toward the geyser basin, tracks that were unusually deep in the snow, as if bearing a weight far greater than Reed and her equipment should have possessed. Following the strange, heavy footprints for nearly a mile, the rescue team arrived at the edge of the steamboat geyser. There they found Dr. Reed standing motionless, her back to them. She was alive, but completely unresponsive to their calls. Her body was covered in a bizarre, crystalline frost that had formed in intricate patterns the experienced rangers had never witnessed. Her eyes were open, fixed on some distant point in the swirling steam and snow, though there was nothing there to be seen. Ranger Rodriguez later noted in his report that while her body temperature was dangerously low, she exhibited none of the other classic signs of severe hypothermia. The frost formations, he wrote, were unlike anything he had seen in 2 decades of search and rescue operations. As they prepared to transport her, the team discovered yet another anomaly. The ground around Reed's feet was covered in complex geometric patterns created by the interaction of the geyser's steam with the extreme cold. These were not the random formations of ice and snow. They possessed angles and symmetries so precise they appeared almost intentional, like a form of communication written on the landscape. Photographs of the patterns would later be analyzed, with some researchers noting their resemblance to complex fractals, while others whispered that they looked more like a deliberate, intelligent message. Dr. Reed was evacuated and made a full physical recovery. But her memory of the missing hours remained fragmented and deeply unsettling. She spoke of hearing music emanating from the geothermal features, a low, rhythmic vibration that seemed to resonate through her entire body. She described seeing intelligent lights moving within the steam, guiding her toward the geyser. Most puzzling were her repeated references to being shown something by a presence connected to the geothermal activity of the basin. "I never thought I'd be the one telling this story," she told a colleague. "The steam, it wasn't just steam. It had patterns, movements that weren't random. I remember feeling like I was being invited to understand something fundamental about the Earth." The official incident report offered a conventional explanation. Dr. Reed had suffered a form of hypothermia-induced delirium, exacerbated by dehydration and exhaustion. The strange phenomena she described were officially attributed to hallucinations. Yet, the evidence contradicted this simple diagnosis. Her own research notes, found at the campsite, detailed mineral formations with crystalline structures that should have been impossible under the known conditions. Her final, shaky entry read, "It remembers. It's been waiting." Privately, Ranger Rodriguez and others on the rescue team admitted that what they had witnessed did not align with any known medical or scientific explanation for cold exposure emergencies. The rescue of Dr. Eleanor Reed remains a chilling enigma in the annals of Yellowstone National Park. She never returned to field research, retiring from academia 2 years later. Her story became part of the park's winter lore, a quiet testament shared among rangers and researchers who brave the isolated backcountry. It serves as a profound reminder that even in our modern age of scientific understanding, there are still places on Earth where the boundaries between the known and unknown can blur, where the planet's raw, ancient power can manifest in ways that defy explanation, especially when winter's cold descends with its full force upon the wilderness. It was December of 2012 when 3 experienced winter rangers, Mike Donovan, Lisa Chen, and Tom Harding, set out on a routine expedition to check monitoring equipment at Black Lake, a remote body of water in Yellowstone's southwestern corner. The temperature had been hovering around -25 degrees for several days, with wind chills approaching -50. The lake, normally accessible only by a multi-day trek in summer, could be reached more quickly in winter when the frozen landscape allowed for direct travel across frozen rivers and snow-covered meadows. The 3 rangers had worked together for years and had extensive experience with Yellowstone's winter conditions. Their mission straightforward: replace batteries, collect samples, and verify the integrity of a research station used by scientists studying the lake's unique ecosystem. The first day of their journey proceeded without incident. They traveled by snowmobile to within 2 miles of the lake, then proceeded on foot with their equipment. The sky was clear, creating a stark contrast between the brilliant blue above and the endless white of the snow-covered landscape. As they approached Black Lake late that afternoon, they noticed something unusual: a series of holes in the ice, arranged in a pattern that appeared too regular to be natural. What struck me immediately was the precision of these holes. Lisa Chen later recounted in her official statement. They were perfectly circular, approximately 3 feet in diameter, and arranged in what appeared to be a geometric pattern. The edges were clean, as if cut with a tool rather than formed by natural ice processes. The rangers set up camp a safe distance from the mysterious holes and proceeded with their tasks the next morning. As they began taking water samples, they noticed that the ice around the holes had unusual properties. It was thinner than expected in some areas and thicker in others, creating an uneven surface that made movement treacherous. The water in the holes was also unusually clear, with visibility extending several feet below the surface despite the winter conditions. The first sign of trouble came when Tom Harding, while attempting to take a measurement near one of the holes, suddenly fell through what appeared to be solid ice. The ice around him had given way without warning, creating an opening larger than the holes they had previously observed. Donovan and Chen immediately sprang into action, throwing Harding a rope and pulling him from the frigid water within seconds. The incident, however, revealed something deeply unsettling. When Harding was pulled from the water, the rangers noticed that the ice that had broken beneath him was not natural. The edges showed signs of being cut or melted in a precise pattern, as if designed to give way under specific weight or pressure. More disturbingly, as they examined the area, they found what appeared to be metallic objects embedded in the ice. Beneath the surface, objects that didn't match any equipment known to be used in the park. We've seen all kinds of things left behind by visitors and researchers over the years, Mike Donovan noted in his report. But these objects were different. They were dark, non-reflective, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They were cold to the touch, colder than the surrounding ice, which shouldn't have been possible given the ambient temperature. As evening approached, the Rangers decided to cut their expedition short and return to base camp to report their findings. Before they could leave, however, they noticed movement in the water beneath the ice. Through the clear sections, they could see shapes moving below. Not fish or other aquatic life native to the lake, but larger forms that seemed to move with purpose and coordination. The shapes appeared to be interacting with the embedded objects, sometimes touching them with what looked like appendages or extensions of their bodies. The decision to leave was made quickly, but the journey back proved more challenging than anticipated. The weather had turned unexpectedly, with winds picking up and visibility decreasing. As they made their way across the frozen landscape, they became aware of sounds that didn't match their experience of Yellowstone in winter. Beneath the howling wind, they could detect a low-frequency hum that seemed to emanate from the direction of Black Lake. The sound was rhythmic, pulsing in patterns that suggested intelligence rather than natural phenomena. What happened next would become one of Yellowstone's most controversial winter incidents. As the Rangers traveled, they became disoriented despite their experience with navigation in extreme conditions. Their compasses began to malfunction, spinning erratically rather than pointing north. GPS equipment failed to maintain a consistent signal. Most disturbingly, they began to see lights in the distance, not the aurora borealis, which sometimes appears in Yellowstone's winter sky, but focused beams that moved with purpose across the landscape. "I've spent 15 winters in Yellowstone," Chen later testified during the official inquiry. "I know every natural phenomenon this park can produce. What we saw that day wasn't natural. The lights moved against the wind, changed direction abruptly, and seemed to respond to our presence. At one point, a beam of light passed directly over us, illuminating the area with a greenish glow that made the snow appear almost fluorescent. The temperature dropped noticeably when the light passed over us, despite our thermal gear." The Rangers eventually found their way back to Grant Village, exhausted and shaken by their experience. Their official report detailed the strange holes in the ice, the embedded objects, the unusual shapes beneath the water, the equipment malfunctions, and the mysterious lights. The report was met with skepticism by some park officials who suggested that the Rangers might have experienced hypothermia-induced hallucinations. However, when a team was sent to investigate Black Lake the following week, they found evidence that supported at least some of the Rangers' claims. The holes in the ice were still visible, though partially refrozen. Water samples taken from the lake showed unusual mineral content and microorganisms not typically found in Yellowstone's aquatic systems. Most compellingly, thermal imaging revealed temperature anomalies beneath the ice that suggested heat sources inconsistent with known geothermal activity in the area. The investigation was officially closed after 3 months, with the final report concluding that unusual but ultimately natural phenomena were responsible for what the Rangers had experienced. Privately, however, some officials acknowledged that there were aspects of the incident that defied easy explanation. The embedded objects could not be recovered despite multiple attempts. The water samples contained microorganisms that matched nothing in the scientific database. The equipment malfunctions were never fully explained. The 3 Rangers involved in the Black Lake incident were reassigned to different areas of the park following the investigation. All 3 requested transfers away from Yellowstone within a year. Black Lake remains closed to the public during winter months, with official explanations citing unstable ice conditions and sensitive research being conducted. The incident stands as a reminder that even in our modern age of scientific understanding, there are still places where the natural world behaves in ways that challenge our knowledge and perception. It was January of 2015 when Dr. James Henderson, a renowned biologist from the University of Wyoming, led a 3-person research team into Yellowstone's remote backcountry to study extremophile microorganisms in the park's geothermal features. The team included Henderson's graduate assistant, Maria Flores, and field technician Ben Carter. All 3 were experienced in working in extreme environments, with previous expeditions to Antarctica, the Atacama Desert, and deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Their destination was the Shoshone Geyser Basin, one of Yellowstone's most isolated thermal areas, accessible only by a multi-day trek even in summer. In winter, the journey becomes exponentially more challenging, with temperatures often dropping below -30 degrees and snow depths exceeding 10 feet in some areas. The team had secured special permits for their expedition, which was scheduled to last 10 days and focus on collecting samples from thermal features that remain active even in extreme cold. The first communication from the team came on day 3 of their expedition via satellite phone. Dr. Henderson reported that they had successfully reached the Shoshone Geyser Basin and established a base camp. He sounded enthusiastic about their initial findings, noting that some microorganisms appeared to be exhibiting unusual behaviors in the extreme cold. "We're seeing cellular structures that shouldn't be stable at these temperatures," he explained. "The way these organisms are adapting to the thermal gradients in this environment could rewrite some of our understanding of extremophile life." That was the last communication anyone received from the Henderson research team. When they failed to check in on day 5 as scheduled, park officials initially assumed equipment failure. However, when the team missed their second scheduled check-in on day 7, a search and rescue operation was initiated. What the search team found would become one of Yellowstone's most disturbing winter mysteries. The Henderson team's camp was located exactly where they had indicated in their last communication. The tents were still standing, though covered with a thick layer of frost and snow. Inside, researchers found equipment arranged with scientific precision, suggesting the team had been methodical in their work. What was missing, however, were any signs of the researchers themselves or their research samples. The first unusual detail noted by the search team was the condition of the equipment inside the tents. Electronic devices that should have been rendered inoperable by the extreme cold appeared to still be functioning. Laptop computers showed active screens with data still being collected from remote sensors. Microscopes were powered on and focused on slides that contained what appeared to be living microorganisms, despite the ambient temperature that should have frozen and killed any biological samples. "We've never seen anything like it," Ranger Sarah Mitchell, who led the search operation, later reported. The equipment was running as if it were in a climate-controlled laboratory, not a tent in -30-degree weather. When we touched the devices, they were cold to the touch, but somehow still functioning. The biological samples under the microscopes were showing signs of life, movement, cellular division that simply shouldn't be possible in those conditions. As the search team expanded their investigation, they discovered tracks leading away from the camp toward the heart of the geyser basin. These tracks were unusual in several respects. They showed 3 people moving in single file, with the footprints spaced evenly, suggesting a deliberate, unhurried pace. What made the tracks particularly puzzling was their depth. They pressed into the snow far more than would be expected from people of the researchers' known weights, even accounting for gear. Following the tracks for nearly a mile, the search team made a discovery that deepened the mystery. Near the edge of the Minute Geyser, one of the basin's most active thermal features, they found the team's research equipment arranged in a precise circular pattern around the geyser's cone. Microscopes, sample containers, and monitoring devices were positioned at equal distances from each other, all aimed toward the geyser. The equipment was still functioning, powered by batteries that should have frozen and failed hours earlier in the extreme cold. Most disturbing was what the search team found in the center of this arrangement. 3 sets of parkas, gloves, and boots were neatly folded and placed in a triangular formation. There was no sign of the researchers themselves, no tracks leading away from the area, and no indication of what had happened to them. The thermal imaging equipment used by the search team showed temperature anomalies around the geyser that were inconsistent with known geothermal activity patterns. The search continued for 5 more days, expanding to cover the entire Shoshone Geyser Basin and surrounding areas. Despite extensive efforts that included aerial searches and ground teams with specialized equipment, no trace of the Henderson research team was ever found. The official search was called off after a week, with park officials acknowledging that the chances of finding anyone alive in those conditions were virtually non-existent. What made the disappearance particularly puzzling were the entries found in Dr. Henderson's research journal, which had been left in his tent. The final entries, written in a steady hand that showed no signs of panic or distress, described increasingly unusual observations about the microorganisms they were studying. The organisms appear to be exhibiting collective behavior. One entry read, "Individual cells are responding to stimuli in ways that suggest communication between them. The patterns are complex, almost mathematical in their precision." The final entry, dated the day before their last communication, was even more cryptic. "I'm beginning to wonder if we're the ones being studied rather than the other way around." The official investigation concluded that the Henderson research team had likely experienced a form of collective delusion or hypothermia-induced psychosis, leading them to abandon their equipment and venture into the wilderness where they succumbed to the extreme conditions. This explanation, however, failed to account for many of the unusual details found at the site, including the functioning equipment in extreme cold and the lack of tracks showing where the researchers might have gone. The disappearance of the Henderson research team remains officially unsolved, listed in park records as presumed deceased, cause unknown. The Shoshone Geyser Basin remains closed to researchers during winter months, with official explanations citing unstable ice conditions and sensitive environmental concerns. For those who work the search and examine the evidence, the case represents a humbling acknowledgement of how much we still don't understand about the natural world, especially in extreme environments like Yellowstone in winter. It was early February of 2008 when Ranger David Thompson set out on what should have been a routine 3-day patrol of Yellowstone's northern range. Thompson was a veteran winter ranger with 12 years of experience in the park, known for his meticulous attention to safety protocols and his calm demeanor in emergency situations. The temperature had been hovering around -20 degrees for several days, with occasional drops to -30 during the night hours. Thompson's patrol route would take him through the Lamar Valley, an area known for its wildlife and relatively gentle terrain compared to other parts of the park. He checked out of the Mammoth Hot Springs Ranger Station at 7 a.m., leaving behind a detailed itinerary and emergency contact information. His snowmobile was in excellent condition, fully fueled, and equipped with standard emergency gear, including a satellite phone, GPS unit, and personal locator beacon. The first day passed without incident. Thompson made his scheduled radio call at 5 p.m. from his first checkpoint near Slough Creek. His voice came through clear and steady, as always. "Everything proceeding according to plan," he reported. "Saw a small pack of wolves near the river earlier today. They appeared healthy and were moving with purpose. I've set up camp at the designated spot. The temperature is holding at around -22, but the wind has died down, so it feels manageable. We'll check in tomorrow at the same time." The following morning, Thompson made a brief unscheduled call to dispatch at 8:15 a.m. "Just wanted to report some unusual tracks I've come across about 2 miles east of my current position," he said. "Not anything I can identify. The stride length is longer than any animal native to this area, and the pattern doesn't match anything in my experience. I'm going to document them and continue with my patrol. Nothing to be concerned about, just unusual. That noon call never came. When Thompson failed to check in as scheduled, dispatch initially assumed communication difficulties. After waiting 30 minutes, dispatch attempted to raise Thompson on all frequencies. When there was no response, they tried his satellite phone, which went directly to voicemail. At 2:30 p.m., dispatch received a brief, garbled transmission from Thompson's radio frequency. The transmission lasted only 17 seconds and was largely unintelligible due to static and interference. What could be discerned, however, was deeply troubling. Thompson's voice, normally calm and measured, sounded strained and breathless. In the fragments that could be understood, he appeared to be describing something he was observing. Something coming toward me. Not an animal. The light, changing colors, no tracks. It's not making any sound. I'm moving back toward the snowmobile. The temperature is dropping. It's not possible. Getting colder. The snow around it, crystallizing patterns. The transmission ended abruptly with what sounded like a sharp intake of breath, followed by silence. A search and rescue operation was initiated immediately, with 2 teams dispatched to Thompson's last known position. The weather had begun to deteriorate, with clouds moving in and wind speeds increasing. By nightfall, a full-scale blizzard had developed, with wind chills dropping to -50 degrees. The search teams were forced to take shelter and wait for the storm to pass. The following morning, when the weather cleared enough for search operations to resume, teams made a disturbing discovery. They located Thompson's snowmobile approximately 3 miles from his last known position. The vehicle was upright and undamaged, with a full tank of fuel. The engine was cold, suggesting it hadn't been running for some time. The GPS unit showed Thompson's route matched his planned patrol path, ending abruptly at that location. What made the scene particularly unsettling was the condition of the snowmobile and surrounding area. The vehicle was covered with a strange crystalline formation that differed from normal frost or ice. The crystals were larger and more geometrically precise than typical ice formations, with angles and facets that seemed almost deliberate in their design. When touched, they felt colder than the surrounding snow, despite the ambient temperature of -25 degrees. Most disturbing was what the search team found near the snowmobile. Thompson's emergency gear, including his satellite phone and personal locator beacon, was scattered on the ground around the vehicle. The beacon had been activated, but appeared to have been disabled. The battery compartment was open, and the batteries were missing. The satellite phone had been shattered, though there were no marks on the casing to suggest impact damage. 2 weeks later, when the weather finally broke enough for a more thorough search, teams made a discovery that deepened the mystery rather than solving it. Approximately 5 miles from where Thompson's snowmobile was found, searchers discovered a large circular area where the snow appeared to have been compressed in a pattern that didn't match any natural phenomenon. The circle was approximately 50 feet in diameter, with the snow inside pressed down to a depth of nearly 2 feet, while the surrounding area remained undisturbed. Within this circle, searchers found Thompson's parka, folded neatly and placed in the center. The parka showed signs of unusual crystalline formations similar to those found on his snowmobile. There were no tracks leading to or from the circle, despite the fresh snow that had fallen after the storm. The ground around the circle showed no signs of disturbance, as if someone or something had been placed there without leaving any trace of how they arrived or departed. Ranger David Thompson was never found. His disappearance remains officially unsolved, listed in park records as presumed deceased cause unknown. His final transmission continues to be studied by researchers interested in unexplained phenomena. A question that hangs in the cold air like frost on a window pane, visible yet impossible to grasp. It was late December of 2000 when Yellowstone experienced one of its most unusual winter incidents, an event that would puzzle even the most experienced park rangers. The temperature had been hovering around -20 degrees for several days, with a light snow having fallen the previous day, leaving a fresh layer of powder over the existing snowpack. Rangers Emma Wilson and Carlos Rodriguez were conducting a routine wildlife survey in the Hayden Valley area when they noticed something that didn't make sense. They had been following a set of wolf tracks that appeared fresh, perhaps from earlier that morning. The tracks were clear and well-defined in the new snow, showing the distinctive pattern of a wolf pack moving through the valley. What caught Wilson's attention was how abruptly the tracks ended. The tracks just stopped, Wilson later reported in her official statement. There wasn't any sign of disturbance, no indication that the wolves had taken flight or been startled. One moment the tracks were there, continuing across the valley floor, and the next moment, nothing. Rodriguez was equally puzzled. As an experienced tracker with 15 years in Yellowstone, he had seen animals employ various evasive tactics, but nothing that would explain the complete disappearance of tracks in such a manner. The snow around the area where the tracks ended was undisturbed, showing no signs of struggle, no blood, and no indication of predators or prey. As they moved through the valley, they noticed additional instances of the same phenomenon. Tracks of various animals that ended abruptly without explanation. They found deer tracks, coyote tracks, and even bison tracks that all shared this characteristic of sudden termination. In each case, the tracks were clear and well-defined, up to a specific point, then simply disappeared without any sign of what had happened to the animals that made them. What made the discovery particularly troubling was that the Hayden Valley was home to a significant population of wildlife. The sudden disappearance of multiple animals without any signs of struggle or predation was unprecedented in the rangers' experience. We've seen animals killed by predators. We've seen them fall through ice. We've seen them caught in avalanches, Rodriguez noted in his report. In all these cases, there are signs, disturbed snow, blood, tracks of predators, evidence of struggle. Here, there was nothing. Just tracks that ended as if the animals had been lifted from the ground without disturbing the snow around them. The rangers decided to return to the ranger station to report their findings. As they made their way back, they noticed something even more unsettling. Their own tracks were behaving in the same unusual manner. When they looked back, they could see that their footprints, which should have been clearly visible in the fresh snow, were fading rapidly, disappearing within minutes of being made. "I've never seen anything like it," Wilson later recounted. "We were walking through fresh powder, yet our tracks were disappearing behind us as if the snow itself were erasing our passage. It wasn't wind. There was no wind at that moment. It was as if the memory of our presence was being unwritten in real time." The two rangers stood motionless for a long moment, watching as the crisp indentations of their boots slowly lost their definition, the edges softening and the depressions gradually rising until the surface was smooth and unbroken once more. The phenomenon was silent and absolute. In their years of combined service in Yellowstone's most extreme conditions, they had never witnessed anything that defied the basic laws of physics so completely. Rodriguez, a man of methodical and scientific temperament, knelt to examine the snow more closely. He placed his gloved hand on the surface where his own footprint had been moments before. The snow was cold, of course, but it didn't feel unusually compacted or disturbed. "This isn't possible," he said quietly, the words barely a cloud of vapor in the frigid air. "Snow doesn't behave this way. It doesn't just heal itself." The implications of what they were witnessing began to settle in, bringing with it a cold dread that had nothing to do with the temperature. If the snow could erase their tracks, it could erase their path back to their snowmobiles. It could erase their presence entirely, leaving them as directionless and untraceable as the wolves whose tracks had first drawn their attention. The Hayden Valley, a place they knew intimately, had suddenly become an alien landscape governed by unknown rules. "We need to move," Wilson said, her voice tight with controlled urgency. "Back the way we came. Keep your eyes on the terrain ahead, but don't look back. Just keep moving." They turned and began to retrace their steps, or what they hoped were their steps. Without tracks to follow, they were relying on memory and landmarks, a precarious method of navigation in a valley where features could become obscured by blowing snow or shifting light. The silence of the valley felt different now, no longer peaceful, but watchful. The air, which had been still, now seemed to carry a faint, almost imperceptible hum, a low-frequency vibration that resonated in their bones rather than their ears. The journey back to their snowmobiles, which should have taken less than 30 minutes, stretched into an hour of tense, silent concentration. Every ridgeline looked like the next, every stand of trees a potential landmark that might lead them astray. They moved steadily, their breath the only sound in the vast emptiness, the faint hum a constant, unnerving presence beneath their feet. When they finally sighted their snowmobiles, the relief was palpable. The machines were exactly as they had left them, untouched by the strange phenomenon that had affected the valley floor. As they approached, however, Rodriguez stopped and pointed toward the snowmobile's tracks. The deep, parallel grooves left by their machines upon arrival were also fading, the edges blurring and the depressions slowly filling in. They didn't wait to watch the process complete. They quickly started the engines, the familiar roar a comforting defiance of the valley's unnatural silence. Without a word, they turned the machines around and headed back toward the ranger station, not once looking back at the pristine, empty white expanse of the Hayden Valley. The official report they filed was cautious and clinical, but the case remains a chilling reminder that in the vast, ancient wilderness of Yellowstone, there are still processes at work that are beyond human understanding, forces that operate on a scale of time and physics that we can barely perceive. It was the first week of January in 2017 when a pair of rangers, Jake Calloway and his rookie partner, Ben Foster, were tasked with retrieving seismic monitoring equipment from the Norris Geyser Basin. A series of unusually strong tremors had prompted geologists to pull the devices for data analysis and maintenance. The temperature was a brutal negative 28 degrees, with a wind chill that drove the effective temperature down to nearly negative 50. Steam from the basin's countless geothermal features froze instantly on any surface, creating an eerie, otherworldly landscape of ghostly trees and crystalline formations. Calloway, a 10-year veteran of Yellowstone winters, moved with the practiced economy of a man who knew every wasted motion could cost precious body heat. Foster, though well-trained, was still adjusting to the profound and hostile beauty of the park's most extreme season. They traveled on foot the final mile to the basin, their snowmobiles parked on a ridge where the air was too cold for steam to accumulate and obscure visibility. The first seismic station was located near the edge of the Porcelain Basin, an area of stark white mineral deposits and active geysers. As they worked to detach the equipment from its moorings, Foster's boot dislodged a chunk of ice near the base of a thermal feature. Beneath the ice, half buried in the silt, was a small, dark object that clearly didn't belong. It was a solid-state voice recorder, a model popular with researchers and journalists, encased in a protective rubber shell. It was old, perhaps from the early 2000s, and covered in a thin layer of mineral scale that suggested it had been there for years. "Finders keepers," Calloway grunted, prying it from the frozen mud. "Probably belonged to some tourist who dropped it last summer. Doubt it works after a winter or two out here." Foster, however, was curious. He wiped the ice from the device and noted that the battery compartment was sealed tight. Back at the ranger station that evening, after they had completed their grim task in the bitter cold, he managed to find the correct cable and connected the recorder to a computer. To his surprise, the device powered on. Its memory contained a single audio file, dated February 12, 2002, 15 years ago to the day. The recording began with the sound of wind and the gentle hiss of nearby thermal features. A man's voice, calm and professional, began to speak. "Field log, day 4. Dr. Eris Thorne. The atmospheric conditions in the Norris Basin are unique. The cold interacts with the steam in ways I haven't observed elsewhere. It's creating acoustic phenomena, echoes, and resonances that seem almost structured. I've been trying to record them, but standard microphones seem to distort the frequencies." The recording continued for several minutes with Dr. Thorne describing his work. He was apparently a physicist or acoustical engineer, studying the sounds of the geysers. His tone was that of a scientist meticulously documenting his environment. Then his voice changed, tinged with the first hint of something other than academic curiosity. "There's something else here," he said, his voice lower now. "Beneath the ambient noise, a pattern. It's not random. It's a low-frequency pulse, very regular, like a heartbeat. It's not seismic, I've checked. It's coming from the air itself, or maybe from the steam. It's communicating." For the next 10 minutes, the recording captured the strange, rhythmic pulsing Thorne was describing. It was a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate in the listener's chest. It was unnervingly regular, a biological sound in a place that should have only geological noise. Thorne could be heard breathing heavily, perhaps in awe or fear. "It's getting stronger," he whispered. "Or maybe I'm just tuning into it better. It feels intentional." I've started whistling back at it, matching the frequency. And it responds. The pattern changes when I do it. It's an interaction. I don't know what I'm interacting with, but it's there. It's aware. The recording took a more disturbing turn in its final minutes. Thorne's breathing became ragged. The rhythmic pulsing was now joined by other sounds, high-pitched whistles and clicks that seemed to move around the microphone, as if the source of the sound was no longer stationary. "It's all around me," Thorne said, his voice trembling. "The steam, it's not just steam anymore. When it catches the light, just for a second, there are shapes. Not just random condensation, they're geometric, like crystalline insects. And they move with the sound. They're beautiful and terrifying." The final 2 minutes of the recording were difficult to listen to. Thorne's speech became fragmented, a mixture of scientific observation and raw, primal fear. The light, it's bending around them. The temperature is dropping when they pass. I can see my breath freezing in midair. The sound, it's inside my head now, not just my ears. It's showing me something. Patterns, geometry, the mathematics of everything. I understand. Oh God, I understand. The last 30 seconds contained no speech. There was only the sound of the wind, the hiss of the geysers, and the clear, rhythmic pulsing that had been the recording's constant companion. Then, a new sound joined them, a sharp, metallic crack, like rock splitting in the extreme cold. This was followed by a sudden, high-pitched shriek from Thorne, a sound of pure shock and agony that was cut off abruptly. The recording ended not with silence, but with a single, clear, resonant tone that held for 3 seconds before vanishing. Calloway and Foster sat in silence for a long time after the recording finished. The implications of what they had just heard were staggering. A man, clearly a scientist, had seemingly interacted with an unknown intelligence in the Norris Geyser Basin 15 years ago and had vanished. A search of park records revealed no Dr. Eris Thorne. No research permits had been issued to anyone by that name in 2002, and no missing persons report matched his description. It was as if the man had never existed. The only evidence of his presence was the small voice recorder, now sitting on their desk, a digital ghost in a plastic shell. The Rangers filed a report about the discovery of the recorder, but they were deliberately vague about its contents, citing potential evidence in an ongoing investigation. They knew that reporting a recording of a man's disappearance and his interaction with what sounded like an unknown intelligence would likely be dismissed as a hoax or a misinterpretation of natural phenomena. The mystery deepened a week later when Foster, reviewing old seismic data from the Norris Basin, found an anomaly. On February 12, 2002, the same day the recording was made, seismographs had registered a single, powerful, ultra-high-frequency event. It was not an earthquake. It was a burst of energy that lasted less than a second and was completely unlike any other geological signal ever recorded in the park. It was a signature of something that had released a massive amount of energy in an instant. The Norris Basin recording was never made public. It remains in a restricted access archive at Yellowstone, a digital artifact documenting an impossible event. Rangers who have heard it speak of it in whispers, a cautionary tale told during long winter nights. It serves as a reminder that Yellowstone's geothermal wonders are not just scenic features. They are windows into the Earth's immense power, places where the boundaries between the geological and the biological, the known and the unknown, can sometimes become terrifyingly thin. Dr. Eris Thorne, whoever he was, had peered through that window. And something, it seemed, had peered back. It was late on a Saturday night in March of 2019 when a severe blizzard descended upon Yellowstone's northern region. The storm had moved in faster than forecasted, trapping a handful of visitors and park staff in various locations. At the Canyon Village Ranger Station, a small modern facility designed to withstand the elements, Ranger Laura Martinez was pulling a double shift. The storm raged outside, a maelstrom of wind and snow that reduced visibility to near zero and pushed the temperature to a deadly negative 35 degrees. At 11:47 p.m., the emergency line rang. The caller ID showed the number was coming from a cell phone, which was unusual. Reception was almost non-existent during a storm of this magnitude. Martinez answered, her voice calm and professional. "Yellowstone emergency, Ranger Martinez speaking." The response was a torrent of panicked, static-filled speech from a man. "Help me. Please, you have to help me. I'm trapped." The connection was terrible, his voice breaking up, but the terror was clear. "Sir, calm down," Martinez said, her training kicking in. "Where are you? Can you tell me your location?" "I'm at Canyon Village," the man said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I was in the lodge, but the power went out. I tried to get to my car, but I got turned around. I can't see anything. The snow, it's like a wall." Martinez pulled up the guest registry. A single visitor had checked into the Canyon Lodge cabins that day. A man named Robert Klein, here on a solo photography trip. "Mr. Klein, is that you?" Yes, yes, that's me, he sobbed. Please, you have to send someone. I'm not alone out here. Martinez's mind raced. Hypothermia could cause auditory and visual hallucinations. It was the most likely explanation. Mr. Klein, listen to me. You need to find shelter immediately. Are you near any of the buildings? I'm between the visitor center and the lodge, he said. I can see the lights of the visitor center, but they're wrong. They're moving. Not like normal lights. They're floating. Okay, stay where you are, Martinez said, trying to keep her voice even. I'm dispatching a team. Can you see any landmarks? Anything at all? There's a big pine tree right in front of me, Klein said, his voice shaking. That's how I know I'm not moving. But the footsteps, they're circling me. I can hear them crunching in the snow. Crunch, 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 all around me. But when I shine my light, there's nothing there. No tracks, just fresh snow. This detail gave Martinez pause. Hallucinations were one thing, but a consistent, detailed description like this was more concerning. Keep talking to me, Mr. Klein. Tell me about the lights. They're not flashlights, he said, his voice a mixture of fear and fascination. They're soft like glowworms, little orbs of pale blue light. They drift through the air just above the snow. They don't illuminate anything. They just are. And they're getting closer. Martinez had already alerted the on-call search and rescue team, but she knew they wouldn't be able to move in these conditions. It would be suicide. She was Klein's only lifeline. Mr. Klein, I need you to focus. Do you have any emergency supplies with you? A blanket? A heat pack? I have my camera bag, he said. That's it. I was trying to get back to my room to get my gear. The footsteps are faster now. They're running in circles around me. I can't tell which direction the sound is coming from anymore. It's everywhere. The line went silent for a moment, save for the hiss of static and the faint sound of the wind. Mr. Klein, are you still there? Martinez asked, her heart pounding. I dropped my phone, he said, his voice distant. I'm trying to find it. The lights are right here now. They're beautiful. So many of them. They're making patterns, circles and spirals. They're not making any sound, but I can hear them in my head. It's like music. The connection was growing weaker. Martinez could hear another sound now in the background, a low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to pulse in time with Klein's description of the lights. Mr. Klein, you need to get away from the lights. Find a building. Break a window if you have to. It's okay, he said, his voice suddenly serene, all trace of panic gone. I'm not scared anymore. They're not here to hurt me. They're just curious. They want to show me something. Robert, no, stay with me, Martinez shouted into the phone. It's so warm here, he whispered, his voice fading. The snow is gone. I'm standing on stars. I understand now. The storm isn't just a storm. It's a doorway. And they've opened it. The line went dead. Martinez stared at the phone, her hand trembling. She immediately tried to call back, but the call would not go through. She alerted the SAR team, but as she feared, they were grounded by the blizzard. All she could do was wait and listen to the storm rage outside. The silence on the other end of the line more terrifying than any scream. The storm finally broke late the next afternoon. A search team was dispatched immediately. They found Robert Klein's body exactly where he had said he would be, halfway between the visitor center and the lodge, standing at the base of a large pine tree. The scene was impossible. Klein was fully dressed in his winter gear, but he showed no signs of hypothermia. His body temperature, when measured, was normal. He was standing upright, his eyes open and fixed on the sky, a faint, peaceful smile on his face. There were no marks on his body, no signs of struggle or injury. Most disturbing was the snow around him. The blizzard had dumped over 2 feet of fresh snow the night before. Yet the ground, in a perfect 10-foot circle around Klein's body, was completely bare, showing the frozen grass and earth underneath. Outside this circle, the snow was deep and undisturbed. There were no tracks leading to or from the tree where he stood. The official cause of death was listed as exposure, though privately, the coroner and the rangers on the scene admitted that it was a diagnosis of exclusion. The emergency call from Canyon Village remains one of the most unsettling and inexplicable incidents in Yellowstone's history. It was a death witnessed in real time, not through violence, but through a transformation. The American landscape remains vast and unknowable. But nowhere is this more evident than in the heart of Yellowstone during the depths of winter. When the snow covers the roads and the tourist crowds vanish, the park reverts to an ancient, primal state, a world of ice, steam, and profound silence, where the rules of civilization seem to hold little sway. The stories we have explored tonight are drawn from the official records and first-hand accounts of those who work to protect this wilderness. They are stories of experienced professionals, rangers, scientists, and researchers who found themselves facing phenomena that defied their training and challenged their understanding of the natural world. In temperatures where survival itself is a victory, they encountered something more. Moments where the fabric of reality seemed to thin, revealing glimpses of a deeper, more mysterious truth. These accounts share recurring themes that echo through the park's frozen valleys. The radio voices that speak from the static, the footprints that lead nowhere or vanish entirely, the objects returned to the snow without explanation, and the overwhelming, humbling silence that follows these encounters. They are not tales of monsters or ghosts in the traditional sense, but something perhaps more unsettling. Evidence that we are not always the primary observers, that in the great wilderness there are forces and intelligences that operate on a scale beyond our perception. The winter rangers of Yellowstone continue their patrols, their work a quiet vigil against the cold and the isolation. They carry with them the knowledge of these incidents, spoken of in hushed tones and passed down through generations of park staff. They are reminders that in this place, where the Earth's inner heat battles the surface ice, anything is possible. The landscape holds its secrets close, revealed only in fragments to those who find themselves in the wrong place at the right time, or perhaps the right place at the wrong time. What happened to Ranger Mark Jensen in the Lamar Valley? What intelligence did Dr. Reed encounter in the steam of the Norris Geyser Basin? What force erased the tracks in Hayden Valley and left Robert Klein standing in a circle of bare earth? These questions have no answers, only the cold, hard documentation of the events themselves. The files remain open, the recordings archived, and the memories preserved as quiet testaments to the park's enduring mysteries. There is a profound loneliness to these stories, a sense of individuals confronting the incomprehensible in the vast, indifferent wilderness. Yet there is also a strange beauty in the mystery itself, a recognition that the world is still wilder and more complex than our science can explain. Yellowstone in winter is not just a place of scenic beauty. It is a frontier of the unknown, a place where the impossible can become real, if only for a moment. The silence that follows these stories is as important as the stories themselves. It is the silence of the unresolved, the acknowledgement that some things have no explanation. It is the sound of the wind blowing across the snow, the hiss of steam in the frozen air, and the quiet hum of a wilderness that keeps its own counsel. If you or someone you know has a true story to share, an experience in the wild places of America that defies explanation, leave it in the comments below. The archives of Snowbound Screams are built on your accounts, each one a piece of the larger puzzle of the strange and unexplained. Thank you for watching Snowbound Screams. Until next time, stay safe out there.